Hello everyone, I'm Chris Dobbin and I'm welcoming you today to another episode of Amplify Your Brand, the ultimate live on building your powerful brand in today's digital age. Along with my friend and fellow colleague and branding expert on the screen there, Simão, we're here to share expertise and help you take your brand to the next level. So whether you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, marketing professional, someone tinkering around with a personal brand, this is the live stream with practical insights and strategies to help you amplify your brand and stand out in that digital landscape. So please get ready, take some notes, talk about what we take today into action, because by the end of this live stream, you'll have a clear roadmap of building the brand that really truly resonates with your target audience. So again, thank you for joining us today. And let's find another way to amplify your brand. And we're touching on a topic very close to my friend's heart here today, because it's all visual stuff. And you love brand, you love strategy, you love all the nuts and bolts behind the scenes, but your real passion is how can we make it visually exciting and visually interesting and visually on brand. So I think you're going to have a bit of fun with today. Unfortunately, for anybody that is listening to this in a future episode that's on a podcast, you will have to go off and have a look at some of the fantastic artwork we're talking about today, and maybe we'll have those in the notes. But for those that are watching this back live stream, you will get to see a visual feast of fun and games. And I guess, let's get right into it, Sim. Talk me about it. From old school to new school, we're going to transform retro design trends into modern brand magic. What does that all mean?
It means that life is about cycles, and that's the philosophical kickoff to today's session, really. Yep. Because we see constantly trends come and go. Those trends, whether you know or not, whether you notice or not, whether you're in this space or not, they're revivalisms. That's all they are. They are comebacks. And brought backs from the past. They've existed before, and they've added a few elements. They've tweaked a bit of the character, but that's all they are. They're cycles, and they keep fashioning in and out. And speaking of fashion, that's another industry where we see this concept, this cycle of repetition happen again and again. So we're going to talk about visual elements and visual impact today. And again, we apologize for those of you only listening to this. Head on over to our YouTube channel and watch this live, or later on as a recording, to see what we are referring to when we break down the visual elements. But today's session will try to explain by words what visually keeps happening and how pertinent that is within the time scale of yesteryear to today.
All right, so we're going to get into it. We'll go back to the screens and just to highlight that everything we talk about today is part of our P8 branding program, where we've designed over 20 years and developed an upgrade on the brand neon identity framework. So what we do is encompass 8 critical sections of a brand, which we call the 8 Ps. It's an easy to understand and implement program so that you can easy business owner can amplify their brand. Those 8 Ps are on the screen there. But each week we kind of focus on one of them. And this week we're focusing on the persona part of it, because persona is very visual when it comes to things in a natural aspect. Doesn't mean everything is there, but it's definitely that. Actually, I'll just go back to that. Do you want to touch on that just briefly? Like we call persona as one of our Ps. Visual is one aspect of it. But for you to have visual, you still have to have some words that are in a certain way and style and feel, and there's other characteristics such as photos and images that go with that as well, to help bring it together, which is going to obviously come into what we talk about today. But do you want to just maybe break that down a little bit in the differences?
Sure. Well, the 80s were known for a specific look, just like the 60s are, and the trends that we watch develop, they have a basic underlying philosophy. For those into Bauhaus, you know that the colors are the 3 big red, black, and white. If you talk about New York style, you know that it's going to be grungy. It's going to be very rough around the edges. All of these trends, all of these contexts provide a basic theory behind why the visuals unfold into that persona. So the persona is basically the display of that philosophy into whichever means it needs, whether that be written, whether that be the visual expression. And today we are doing that with the persona as it pertains to the trends that are making a comeback within how we understand them in our P8 system.
Yeah. So let's get into trend watching. So from old school to new school, let's talk about bold minimalization. So this is where duotones and minimal color palettes are a la movies, posters, speaking, and language to simplify the impact. Revitalization of big words being used today.
Revivalism.
Revitalism. But they also become a very trendy in using modern color combinations that are seen, some very artistic and looking on brands and campaigns. So let's just talk about that. And I guess you're going to go into some examples, or do you want to summarize?
Yeah. We can go into some examples. And as we can see right here, the bold, minimalistic approach with which these posters speak is very apparent. You have very simplified use of colors, not a whole lot of them. A strong image with a very strong focused message is the commonality to these three posters here. And we start with bold minimalism has a beginning in the continuum of time. We're going to go from the old retro stuff to the more modern stuff, because some of the trends that we talk about today, they didn't exist so much, or they weren't fully explored in the old days like they are today. And we're talking about old days as it pertains to our own age. Obviously, our grandparents would have a different concept of what old days means. But back to this bold minimalist, this first poster here, you can almost see a resuscitation of the old Russian kind of propaganda type of poster with this type of depiction of the message. And then on the second page, we have a bunch of other examples where we see an overarching main color and impact being achieved with contrasting uses of the colors, the typography, but always keeping it very, very simple.
Cool. Love it.
So with the second one, we advance a little bit in time and we come into digital scrapbooking. This is a style that is characterized by a naive depiction, usage again of basic colors, simplified palettes, and overlapping elements. It's almost like you're watching a child entertain themselves with the illustration, doodling some patterns. And it's also a retro approach to the theme, providing an indie look and feel to something that is being portrayed by the art. So we have this example here, and even as you can see, the look of the girl there with the old sweater in wool and the glasses, it's all very old looking, even though the girl herself is quite young. But you see the basic shapes around. You have this strong orange, this pink, this usage of smileys, which was an iconic type of symbol used way back when. And this is the approach that we are talking about when we mention digital scrapbooking. It's a retail, a collage almost of these naive elements. And that itself has again become a style today. And we see this come up in digital. And it's very pertinent because in digital, with the appearance of tools that enable most of us to become creators, if we wanted to become digital creators, we could simply step online and go to tools like Canvas, the Adobe Express. There's a number of variations of graphic tools that we can use today to become a digital creator. But with that, it comes the ignorance of the rules that make up the graphic style. So it's kind of putting Legos back on the table for somebody who wants to understand architecture. They start with Legos, the little basic pieces that are going to allow us to build the small cubes before we jump into big buildings. We're going to understand typography using basic fonts before we jump into refined usages of compositions. All of this is itself included in this style. And we can see that with the resurgence of these brand pieces right here, very, very simplified depictions of elements. And we know they're elements because they contain the basic requirements for us to visually be instructed that those elements are, for example, the eye, they are the lemon, they are the fish. And with how brands implement this, it's really becoming interesting because they are, in a way, picking their own audience and saying, listen, guys, this is for you. You're dressing like this nowadays, and we're reflecting this in the way that we put out our products, our cans of drinks, our posters. This is for you. This is not for the refined whiskey drinker. This is for the fruity flavored person that is looking for a little pop. And we're using the elements that you want to embody.
And I will say they are on trend with things like these. So I'd be interested to see these brands, how they appear in, in 5-10 years from now. So
yes, that's exactly it, and that's exactly it. So Chris and I will be going through these styles without actually mentioning just yet how they can be implemented, because all of this, it needs to be purposeful. You don't just adopt a retro revivalist style if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't speak to your customers. It is not the language that your brand has been speaking thus far. So,
mind you, though, if I went to my dad's wardrobe and grabbed some of his shirts out today, I'd probably be cool. So things do go in cycles.
The question is, have you been cool in the way that your dad's shirts are speaking again?
No, not at all. It would be a totally different day cool. So,
So there you go. So exactly an example of what not to do for the sake of just doing, especially if you're running a business and a brand.
They're totally different things. Yes, totally.
Yes. And with the trend watch, and we keep progressing in time, we jump into retro futurism. What is this retro futurism? Well, as you've probably noticed, the old themes of yesteryear are popping up again in some references to the Miami Vice look, that electric blue and shot pink juxtaposition, the spiky calligraphic typography, that arcade game look that back in the day it had to rely on lines to define planes, because when we were playing in the arcades, 3D was not a fully understood and machine learned language. So we had to create 2D artifacts that displayed 3D in that attempt. So some of this is also seen by retro pixel arts. And let's just jump into a couple of examples that make sense. We have the made in the 80s post.
Ooh, yeah.
We're really jumping back in time. We're revisiting very, very old days that were absolutely astonishing when they came out. I remember seeing this type of look applied to computers, the Spectrum 48Ks, when we dabbled with the 48Ks and played a cassette to insert a game and be able to play it on this very, very archaic type of keyboard.
What's interesting is the one in the middle that can be considered modern now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why it's called retro futurism. It is modern now. It is for the future. But notice how the shelves are round looking. They have that glossy finish that was a production limitation back in the 80s, but now it's brought back because people like that, and they want to have some of those pieces in their home decor. The furniture around it's all very 80s.
but even the futuristic picture of the car doesn't look futuristic. It's dated. It's the 80s from that look.
Exactly.
But it's the 80s future, the future of the 80s. But there's things that if it was done today and it was to do that same thing, it would not look like that.
The 80s look that you just mentioned is the gradients, that chromy reflection effect was
Yep.
perceived as ahead of its time back then. And we know today, and we laugh at it, has a revivalism exercise. We wouldn't consider this an actual futuristic approach because we know that this chrome look was done and dusted. It's now making a comeback, but has sort of a trend. It's going to go again. We know this. This is not
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah.
last
But
a long
instantly,
time.
if you do it, you retrofit your design. Like it makes you transport that
Exactly.
feeling of the 80s back into modernism.
And very interestingly so, what you just said describes perfectly the brief I recently got from a bodybuilder client who wanted to go for this 80s look with a t-shirt design that we released very, very recently. But
And
despite
there's,
him,
yeah,
go,
go.
go.
No, you go. Yep, despite him.
Despite being in today's world, he's a young guy. Despite being in today's world, he definitely went into the thick and thin of the 80s and brought back the electric blue. And when I presented the concept to him, he was very satisfied because it kind of it embodied what he had in his head.
Yeah.
And
Well, the thing is, you've got to think demographically. People in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and maybe 60s were all growing up in the 80s, and were like, for them, this is just a whole bunch of memories come back.
absolutely,
Right.
yes.
So the attachment to this style is not
They
that you
live
love it.
this.
And it's not
Yeah,
like, that's the best looking design I've ever seen. It's not that. It's the memories in your head that just come flooding back because of that
absolutely.
period.
Absolutely, the emotions we locked in when we heard, and I speak from my own experience. When I listened to the Miami Vice intro music, that's already setting in motion a cascade, a set of feelings. And who's going to be the bad guy today? Are they going to chase the cocaine dealer? Is he going to get punched in the face? What's the car going to be today? All of this stuff. It just brings us back to those moments.
Axel Fox and Beverly Hill, cops. Like
Oh
it's
my
just
goodness, another good one.
instantly dates it. Like, and you can hear the tune in your head. Like, so
Yes.
yeah,
Hence why they're making yet another version of that.
that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So continue on, my friend.
All right. So we jump into sustainable design. And we, as I mentioned from the start, we keep stepping forward into today's day and age. Now, sustainable design has been there for a very, very long time. And all the characteristics of the philosophy underlying sustainable design, I remember my teachers telling me about them in school. So they're not nothing innovative in per se. They've been there for a long time, but now we have the ability and conscious and awareness to relook at that and implement it with if probably a bigger efficiency that we did than we did back in the 90s. So recycled and biodegradable materials for all packaging needs is one of these underlying principles. Alternate carbon conscious materials, earthy visual references, elements, and colors. So we talk about this and we think, how do we do this with our design? Well, we take the digital first approach. We have to think in what the life cycle of a product is, whether that be a physical product or a digital product, and we simplify the design elements to conserve the resources that are required to produce that product while preserving aesthetic quality. Like consider the entire life cycle from manufacture down to destruction, and consider the middle steps: the manufacturing, the distribution, the consumer use, the disposal by the consumer, the packaging of it. All of it is considered in sustainable design. We can't just slap green on a tin and say we're now eco-friendly. Coca-Cola, is it a little tip? We
Well,
have
they
to
do
think.
that, by the way. They do make green cans and then say it's. But I know what you
That's
mean.
exactly why. That's exactly why I took a
Just
stab.
do it.
That's exactly why I took a stab. They made
Yeah.
it. They tried to piggyback onto the trend, but nothing in their process changed. The distribution is the same. Manufacture is the same. This is the same exact material. And I thought that was somewhat of a may I even use the word hypocritical approach to eco-friendliness. So
Yeah.
this is not what sustainable design actually is meant to be like. So let's consider everything from start to finish in sustainable design. How that reflects itself visually is another matter, because as we know, there are certain sets of colors that we use to convey our friendliness to the environment. We're talking about the beige, the earthy tones, the greens, the elements that we don't want to see more of or want to see more of, like trees, cities. That's a really interesting poster right there, where we have a city map seen from above go granularly into what is the depiction of a leaf. So that's an interesting one.
I'm interested in the go paperless on paper.
Correct. And that's again, that's the intricacies and the contradictions that we need to be mindful. Like, what is this entire, and I'm just going to call it out because I think it's one of the most ridiculous efforts in being eco-friendly and sustainable of all ages, and we're going to remember this for a very long time. I think it is utterly ridiculous to have drinking straws made of paper. Okay, let's put that out there. We're being served paper straws to drink hot drinks and cold drinks that are mush and actually are making more garbage after a few minutes of having them in the drink. So let's leave that alone for now. Cardboard is actually an interesting recycle approach. Some brands have used cardboard to reprint or print their materials. Print itself, the ink with which print is produced, can be eco-friendly, for those of you who don't know. So this is all stuff that you can talk about with your print manager, your print house, the people who take care of the distribution, and see how you can improve, even if it's marginally, to live and breathe this entire sustainable design philosophy. So let's jump into typography as art. This is basically reducing the need for extra elements and superfluous, in some cases, elements, and focusing on typography to be the main conveyor, the messenger, and the delivery platform for the message, the brand message. So typographic elements become those where the art is highly focused in benefit of that message. Attention is centralized on its letter forms and developed accordingly. So there's a bunch of...
No Comic Sans?
No Comic Sans. Interestingly enough, I'm kidding. Like, Comic Sans is brilliant. If you're talking to an audience up to 11 years old, it is scientifically proven to work wonders because it really does catch their attention and retains memorability. For accountancy and law practices, please no, sir, please.
It instantly says something, and you just can't go there unless, of course, your brand is a 10 or 11-year-old birthday party. But don't do that. But like, you're showing some really interesting brand stuff here that there are some brands that are definitely going down this pathway. Again, when you're saying trend watch, this will instantly date some of those brands in the coming years. Like, they will just date.
It creates that time context around it when that piece of marketing gets put out. Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, and I'll obviously say that there are some brands that can date themselves and still say dated, stay dated, because it becomes a thing. And as their brand grows, the brand will kind of retrofit its marketing to kind of work with modernism and their stuff to make it still look relevant and cool. But you've got to work hard at it, is what I'm trying to get at, is when you have a brand that is not timeless and it's definitely pigeonholed itself. It's bound by something that you have to kind of work really hard to make it retrofit itself to the new, as you said, futurisms, modern trends, or things that change. So you have to be mindful of this when you do this.
Very well said, sir. Yes, absolutely. So, jumping forward. Oops. We're just going to go through some examples where typography has been used as the conveyor of the unspoken message. I use this for some of my content because I focus on fitness with some prominence. And as you can see there, the typography is speaking to bodybuilders, to fitness athletes, to people who are into that sort of physique-y look, polished, in shape kind of look. And the buff word is made up of what seems to be meat, red meat. So again, it just speaks the language of those in fitness who understand the principles of nutrition. And this is where I did not need to put everything into written form saying that I specialize in visual branding for fitness people. It just is implied in the typography, where the typography carries the message. And that is the case with the examples that we have coming up.
Yeah, cool.
So we have some really interesting tools today that simplify the process of producing what we're seeing here on screen by a fraction of time. Literally, I created these just before creating the presentation for today. And it would take me hours and hours and a lot of Photoshop savvy to produce the letter forms that we're seeing here on the screen, to produce the word disco with all those mosaics of what do you call them? Mirror. That was the mirror balls that were so in vogue in the 80s. It would take me hours of doing this. I just wrote out the word that I wanted to render, and the tool delivered. So we are seeing this as a resurgence again because of the capability to produce at speed, at scale, at capacity. And this simplifies and brings back the ability to speak through typography as the art canvas.
Yeah, and look, with AI, this is now becoming something that's just expected. Where previously, 10 years ago or further back, if you saw these done, you know that someone had created this by physically creating the disco, in that case, with those actual pieces. They would have had to have created something in the D shape, and then they'd have to paste each piece of mirror piece on it and go through that whole process. So, and the yarn, same thing, you know, like they would have had to have laid that out that way to make that happen. Where, as you said, technology has got that way. But you can go overboard with this, like you can go too far with this. So,
yes,
you know, so it is again finding, and I guess we have to keep coming back to the whole reason we're having this conversation is trends happen.
Yep.
Brands need to be careful of when they go too far and too deeply into a trend, because I think Apple over the years have done very, very well at retrofitting their design to still look modern but dated, if that makes sense in the way they go about it. And it wasn't until what's his name, Steve Jobs passed away, that they stopped doing it, and now everything they do is modernism and simplism and that kind of stuff. But you know, he was all about if it was a real scrapbook, then use a real scrapbook feel and look and things like that in the actual whatever is going on. Where the new version after his death is now they just want everything to be so minimal and futuristic looking in the way that they do things, and simplistic, you know. So again, they've had to maybe look at themselves and decide how they want to go about it futuristically. And you know, we all know, and you mentioned them earlier, Coca-Cola, there is never a time that their brand or their product is advertising something that's outdated. It's always the current, or you see it trending and they go with it. So they're definitely a brand that just jumps on the bandwagon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for bringing the example of and explaining to those who don't know the past of what design could look like and mean in terms of timelines to this conversation. Because when you just mentioned right there that in the old days, this would take a long time to produce. I'm looking at the word yarn, and to this day, this was over 23 years ago. One of my colleagues in design uni, he took an entire term. It was his only focused project for one particular subject to create this look that we see here with the yarn. It took him a lot of research, a lot of handcraft work to produce a lettering, one simple, small word, short word, I meant. And he had an entire term to produce it and present it at the end. It became one of the pieces of design exposition for the school. But between that and quickly writing yarn on my keyboard and putting into the presentation in less than 1 minute, we've come such a long way. So typography is art today, gives us this entire world of possibilities and pitfalls, like Chris mentioned. It can be overdone. This is not something to just throw on every single thing, because when you bold everything, the contrast is lost. This is another conversation within design.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so we're at 3D.
Yes. Well, this is actually one of the last trends, but it is important to bring up. And the reason I bring this up is because especially with the advent of social media and computing processing power, today we're seeing that what was very time intensive and laborious a few years ago, we're accelerating that to the speed of real time. So 3D and AR. Oh, by the way, AR is nothing but an acronym for augmented reality. So we're seeing augmented reality tools being made available to the public at speeds that we would probably not consider even possible back in the day. So with 3D, we're seeing this blow up, for example, of icons. They are coming up in proportion and size, because the definition of an icon is something that can be read at a very small size. However, the 3D ability and knowledge to produce icons has brought them up in size, so they can be a really good way of boosting presentations. Again, if not overdone. And even websites, dashboards, applications where you can actually appreciate the detail that has gone into creating them. If you have a presentation with a specific topic, an icon built in 3D or with 3D rendering to it kind of simplifies the need to look at the entire presentation and just have that icon as the main delivery of the message. And you know, and you appreciate that it's been presented nicely. It's not just a one color icon. It's there. And this happens in Instagram. We're seeing a lot of Instagram marketing done with utilization of 3D icons, especially in carousels. Carousels where you swipe from one image to the next to see how the number of steps leads to an outcome, to a result. Many times marketers are using one icon for that particular carousel and use it very cleverly, because the work has been done on the icon, and then the carousel frames are swipeable with simple messaging on them.
Yeah.
So AR is also something that I've become very intrigued by, and I use it fairly regularly. If you take a look at the galleries of effects within Instagram, you'll be blown away with what is possible. Every single person, every one of us can become an AR creator. We can actually have access to 3D tools that allow us to create models that can be then put into platforms like Instagram and rendered in real time when people choose to use that effect with the AR on it.
I don't know whether you've seen the Apple updates for this week, what's coming in their software later in the year.
I have.
So my kids are blown away by it now, because they're so excited that they're going to be able to just say, I want a beetle chewing bubble gum on a planet, doing something, right? And it'll create an icon that will represent that. And then they can use that icon in all their messages moving forward and things like that. So it's just the world of AR and 3Ds and all these things are just becoming something that we, as people who don't understand how to do it or how it's done, but can do it on our phones. So it's going to be quite an interesting world. When you talk about it overdone, it's going to be way overdone in the future. So.
Absolutely, and to think that my past was actually in design. I thought when I was coming out of university, I thought I'd be modeling 3D for my future. I just love that area so much that I became a little bit involved with it. And we're talking about the early days of 3D Max, late days of 3D Studio, which was an Autodesk tool. And in terms of requirements,
even the stuff you're talking about, right? You had to think about it, you had to plan it, you had to be able to code it, or like the world was just intense. Now the outcomes are amazing. Everything you're looking on the screen here would be the outcomes of what you're talking about, but you had to think about it and make it happen. What I mentioned earlier is Apple now have just said, just say it, talk out loud, and we'll create it for you.
We'll create it for you. Which is ridiculous to say it, much less think it, and it actually happens. So for example, these are the example of what I was talking about. The icons that have nice 3D renderings, they have shiny areas, they have shadow areas, and they've been blown up. They're no longer just used as very, very small icons. They could be used as presentation pieces. Just like these. This is a good example of a lot of marketing that is currently being done on small platforms that needs to speak an amplified language for the eye. I'm talking about the mobile. When we hold a mobile phone in our hands and we swipe through a feed, we need to be able to identify it and still read what the platforms are feeding into our visual cortex. So these icons become very interesting in that.
I will touch on something with this though. These particular style of 3D is being overused at the moment in a lot of things. So when it comes to presenting yourself, look at these as bases, but don't use them in your presentations if possible. Or if you're going to use the red rocket ship at the bottom there, turn it into your brand colors, make sure it's relevant to your brand in whatever format it can be, because that's when it becomes unique to you. But if you use just that out of the box, what happens is that everyone else is using the same like rocket ship, and then you become same. Yeah. And we've always talked about, in everything we talk about with branding, find your uniqueness, find a way to stand out, and don't do it just to be different. Do it because it's consistently done the same way, so that people remember it's your way, not everybody's way. So just be mindful of that when using these tools.
Very, very good example. So again, a website homepage, and it makes extensive use, or not extensive, but just the right amount of use. So you can see there's 4 main quadrants. One has a very prominent importance in the hierarchy of the page, and then you have these 3 other, but they were achieved by sparing words and putting the message in the icon itself.
Yeah.
And then we have myself playing with AR filters in Instagram, and as you can see,
filters, that's how you wake up in the morning.
I took a selfie this morning. I was feeling a little bit dark. Thank you for that. Now the people, everybody knows.
I just want people to know the real you. That's all.
the real me, authenticity, right? Authenticity. So these are excellent examples of what is incredibly possible today due to these new production methods. It would take a computer of significant capacity and investment only 25 years ago, a full day to render a chrome mask like we're seeing there. Whereas in our phone today, I pull up the effect from the gallery, I overlay it on my face, and I'm speaking with it, reacting in real time to what I'm saying. So that's quite a big jump.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the water challenge with these things, where people have to take a glass of water and then look at themselves with those faces to see whether they can keep the water in their mouth and not spit it out.
Oh wow,
Have you
I
seen that?
have
It's
not.
really funny. If
I
you recommend anybody, if you've got nothing else better to do, to look up at reactions to water and the face things, because it's hilarious to watch people react to them turning like 90 years old in a split second, or going from happy to sad, or
yes,
whatever the thing does.
yeah.
It's very funny to watch people's reactions. And when you've got a glass of water in your mouth, instantly sprays out. It's very
Well,
funny.
gravity will, yeah, gravity will take hold of the situation, I'm guessing.
But bringing it back to what we're talking about today, brands and trends. Like, it's sort of like, you can do this in a really effective way if you understand your brand and use it for this particular trend that's going on. So there are ways, and that's what I'm saying, it's in your kit. It's there. The technology has allowed you to do it. You just have to know how to take your brand's message and the way it needs to be perceived and put it into these filters, and voila, you have it. But again, it will be a trend, and you need to be careful of, it doesn't become the thing that defines you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're going fishing, don't use a car. Just like if you're going to race, please leave the fishing rod at home. Tools for rules, basically.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And we come to the last one of the current trends of impactful visuals. Like, I won't necessarily state or claim that inclusive visuals are necessarily impactful, but they're impactful enough that we're noticing them. We are seeing them overtake everything in our environment. So what are we talking about? All the gender, the races, the origin, the LGBTQ flags, the cultural provenance, the heritage, the cultural backgrounds are now default to everything we see and look at. Inclusivity in hiring, in percentage presence with movies on TV and series that we like to watch, have been absolutely overtaken by inclusivity. And visuals are no different. Sometimes they're more politically sanitized, sometimes they're less so. But you see these elements take hold in everything that we're doing. And even AI is abiding by this clean for view representation.
Well,
that visually...
Yeah, but it's struggling with it too, because they didn't have enough black people or Asian people, or skin tones weren't correctly being done, because there was a bias there. And it's the same with gender as well, with that scenario, that there was maybe too many males building the technology and they forgot the females, and all these things going on. So
interestingly enough,
yeah,
it is exactly what is depicted in this. And just so we all know, these images, again, I used AI to create them in a flash, but they were as simple as, and I'm just going to look for
the prompt screen.
The prompt, exactly. No. This is literally word for word, a group of regular people hanging out at a cafe. And you see probably the lesbian relationship. You see the Indian cultural presence. You see the age appropriate span, and you see the race color card being played all in one. So this is what we're talking about. Inclusivity is a practice, and practices are reflecting themselves through visuals.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not always possible to do this. There are, you do your best effort where you can, but again, it comes back to when we talk about this in the PA program, of understanding your audience. So go here just because you can. You go here because it's relevant to your brand's messaging and where you want to be. Disney, for example, are really struggling with this at the moment, because they're going way too far with being woke and
Yes.
on correction with the inclusivity, that some of the timeless brands, like Cinderella being a girl with blonde hair, doesn't mean it's racist, right? It's just that was the character.
Yes.
She just happened to be blonde and blue-eyed, right? It'd be like Annie, with which they did the same thing, right? It was a well-known blue-eyed girl with red hair, bushy hair, and they turned her into a black girl. Like, it's just sometimes you go too far with this inclusivity to do what you've got to do. I think they did with the mermaid of thing as well.
Yes,
So
they did. Yeah. So
yeah,
trying to accommodate minorities runs the risk of completely going overboard and ostracizing,
alienating.
alienating the existing base customer.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, it's not trying to be racist in any form. It's just choosing that it's the right thing to do for your brand in the way that it messages out. But like, for example, the ad on the three people who are Indian or Sri Lankan or Asian based in that scenario there, if you are selling a cafe or coffee in that country, then that is the natural thing to be doing, right? But
Correct.
if you're in a high profile area where we live in Australia, there are certain parts of the town that would still be appropriate because the culture is taken over that suburb or whatever the case be.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
if you have a Chinese based scenario, then having Indians sitting in a cafe is not going to work for you because it's going to alienate the fact that the Chinese people go, I don't see myself in that photo, so I'm not going to go to that place, So,
And in
yes. So you just got to be mindful of these things that you don't alienate the actual audience that you may be trying to attract by having these photos get created for you with AI in this scenario. So, yeah.
So we've spanned the entire gamut, and we want to again emphasize what today's coffee cup moment really is. The stylish comebacks are here to add depth and vibrancy to modern branding. But like Chris was saying, you need to be mindful of blending and not just copying for the sake of copying and being politically correct with the current woke trend that is happening. So use these retro comebacks to enhance and not overshadow your brand's core personality. You need to integrate, yes, but responsibility with responsibility. And you also need to be purposeful. It should serve a purpose. 3Ds don't absolutely need to be present in your brand if they don't enhance or they don't align with your brand's message or if they've never been present. There would be the need to explain or introduce 3D in some way if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, that's fine. You have other ways of expressing your brand. Lastly, keep it authentic. Your brand story and ethos should remain at the forefront of everything that you decide to do. The elements we've talked about today are here to complement a narrative and enhance it, not dominate it.
Yeah. And if you want a good episode on that, check out last week's episode where we were talking about keeping it real, and it's all about
yes. Very good tie back with last week's episode.
Look forward to seeing you watch that one. But so take on board everything we talked about. As I said, blending, not copying, be purposeful, and keep it authentic. It's really the three key things to take out of today. Is don't just do a trend because it's trendy. Make sure you meet these criteria that we've just talked about on the screen there. And if they do meet the criteria, then go for it. Use that new trend to bring it into your brand's marketing and activities because it's going to enhance and actually be on purpose for what you're trying to do. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, guys, if you love what you've heard about today and you're not sure what to do with it next or you want some help with that, please book a discovery session. We'd like to understand your business and assess the state of your brand, your goals, and where you'd like to be. We've got an approach to that, which is pretty simple in how it works. It's really a 1, 2, 3 approach, which we do that discovery call. We understand where your business is at and where it needs to be. And then we go look at a program that we think is going to fit you. So if it meets your goals and plans in place that we've talked about, then we're going to go on onboarding and do a coaching session with you because we understand that it needs implementing and it needs regular revisions and looking at it so that we can help you stay focused and hopefully amplify your brand in the long term because of the focus we're putting on these things that we discovered and put into the program. So please reach out to us. And I think I'm just going to say to you that if you do discovery session with us, it's going to at least let you understand what your next steps are, whether you work with us or not. The simple fact is we would love to work with you, but we understand that you may have your own team that you want to work with, but we work with these teams. We've done this so many times with clients where we've done them side by side with others. We've worked together with you personally. Love to work with you personally, but we understand that sometimes you have to work with others. But please reach out to us, book the discovery session, and we'd love to talk to you about it. But thank you again, and look forward to talking about next week, where we can amplify your brand. Anything you want to talk about or want people to take action on today?
I would love to hear what was people's listening to this main takeaways. You'll have one or two that stuck with you, that resonated with you. So let us know in the comments whether you're seeing this on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Let us know what was it that you found most interesting about today's presentation. And like usual, leave us a comment of where you're watching this from. With that, we close this and we'll see you next week. Don't forget to keep amplifying your brand.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.